You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Notre Dame Squad Show here on the Locked On Irish YouTube channel and the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. For our first-time listeners, we do this on the Locked On Chicago channel after every single Notre Dame game throughout the regular season. Tyler, the normal host of Locked On Irish, will not be with us tonight because maybe fortunately and unfortunately, he was at the game tonight. So I don't know how he's feeling, putting up probably a pretty penny to go to the game tonight, but Notre Dame loses a heartbreaker, 34-23. They nearly pulled the comeback off. A lot of stuff to get to with this game tonight. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So obviously, we got Kenton Gibbs here of Locked On Wolfpack and Locked On ACC. Brian Smith of Locked On Knowles here with us, and I'm Joe George of Locked On Sports Chicago. So, as the Notre Dame fan on the show today, I am obviously disappointed with the end. Appreciate the effort that Notre Dame put in for sure, trying to make this into a game and making it a game. Couple decisions that obviously we'll talk about: the field goal, the fake punt. I'm glad this game did not end the way it was looking like it was going. To be honest, I hate to do anything that sounds like a moral victory, but compared to what we've seen in the past in my lifetime in Notre Dame and national championship games, it's been a disaster most of the time. So definitely a tough one for Irish fans today. Brian, I'll go to you first. I'm curious your overall reactions as you watch this game play out from a 9-minute and 45-second drive and 18 plays to where it ended.
Well, the opening drive, we expected Riley Leonard to get the ball. I didn't know about 8-9 times, and you could tell he was sick when they said, well, he's puking on the sidelines, and I immediately said, uh-oh. And then they changed their defense a little bit, and Notre Dame didn't have an answer for it, at least not initially. And then more importantly, Notre Dame's cover one defense, you can't run that against Ohio State. Nobody does. Even Texas didn't either. They weren't in sorts, and when you're missing 3 out of your top 5 defensive linemen, you can't give up over 5 yards tote. Kenton, you're a defensive lineman by trade. When you knew they were going in with that in a cover 2, I'm sure the defensive linemen weren't thrilled about it because that extra hat in the box, especially when it's Xavier Watts a lot of the time, that's a tough pill to swallow, but they just weren't going to let Jeremiah beat them, which they did a really good job of. And I know he got to play at the end, but at that point you had to just try cover 1. It didn't work. But were you surprised by Notre Dame running cover 2 there most of the game, or what'd you think about it?
I mean, if you're asking me, cover 2 was what I expected all day because everybody kept talking about Michigan gave you the blueprint. Michigan gave you the blueprint. What did Michigan do? They had 2 first-rounders on the inside, and they could say, hey, you know what? We can stop the run with about 6. If we can stop the run with 6, we can leave everybody else in coverage and make it happen. The problem is, like Brian said, the injuries finally caught up. And I promise you, the reality of this game is when you look at this, this was not an overmatch. This was not an overpowered. This was not a Freeman got out coach. This was literally just that. You look at the margins where Ohio State won this game, and by and large, you could directly point to, if this player is healthy, that play might not happen. If this player is healthy, they may be in the third and a little bit longer. So, I believe they were, 9 for 12 on third down? You know what leads to success on third down? First down success. When you put yourself in third and shorter situations, that leads to it. And even beyond that, another thing that leads to having some good success on third down, if you don't have great pass rushers available, if you don't have guys that can push the pocket and all that stuff available, because the interior pass rushers left some wide open lanes for Will Howard to get through. And of course, he's a Division I quarterback. He's going to do it. He's going to do what works there. So, some people would say that this was a matchup of Chip Kelly and Al Golden, and Al Golden was taken advantage of. But I look at it like this. If the roles were reversed and you give Chip Kelly as shorthanded of an offense as Al Golden had of a defense, do you think this game ends up the same way? I'd say a resounding no.
Yeah, I definitely think Yeah, the injuries at this point, like it always felt like the injuries were going to catch up to Notre Dame at some point. Like you're missing first-round picks, you're missing guys that are elite defenders all over the place in every level of your defense. It definitely felt like, or especially in the first half, like when Ohio State's pulling away from this thing, and you're seeing, the running backs, whether it's Henderson, Junkins, whoever, are not getting touched until they get to the linebackers, kind of performed with a lot of bad tackling. It looked like in the first half, just a lot of missed tackles. It really did feel like the injuries are ultimately what cost the Irish in this game, which is unfortunate. But also, I also think it's like part of our reality now. Don't you guys think that, like, with this expanded playoff, that it feels like every year there's going to be major players missing with all these extra games these teams are going to be playing? And I feel like a lot of times, kind of looking into the future for Notre Dame and other teams, the injuries are going to be something that are going to be a huge storyline for a lot of the playoffs going forward.
Oh, absolutely. That's the logical conclusion of this thing. We know more plays, more games, more banging, more clanging, more wear and tear. That's ultimately always going to be a factor in this thing. Health, this is one of the last gladiator sports. Health is always going to be a very important factor in a gladiator sport. But again, I acknowledge more than anything else, when this game looked truly out of hand, when it got to 31-7, I said, oh, they're going to roll up. They're going to roll up. This game is over. But for them to still come back and still have a fight and still make this game respectable toward the end. And again, I know Irish fans don't want to hear this. I get it, right? That Golden Dome, it doesn't say play like a runner-up today. That's not what the sign says, when they slapping and going through it. It says play like a champion today. I get it. I'm not saying that Notre Dame fans don't have a right to be upset here. What I am going to say is this team put together a hell of a season. And like you said, at some point in time, you can say next man up all you want. But the difference between your first and your third guy exists for a reason. The difference between those things exists for a reason. And you can say all day and night, it was the scheme, it was the this, it was the that. Brian Smith is a guy that works in recruiting a lot. And you know what the saying is in recruiting, because it's a truism. It's not about your X's and your O's. It's about your what, Brian?
Jimmys and your Joes.
And when you got your first two Jimmys down and Joe is in the tent being evaluated and Riley's on the sideline throwing up, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
Notre Dame had, 4 or 5 guys moved around on the offensive line, depending on the game throughout the year. And they played okay tonight. But, Jeremiah Love, they tried to say he was healthy before the game. I'm like, he's got an MCL or whatever that he's nervous. Get the heck out of here. There's no way he's going to be healthy in spring ball, let alone in the national title game. He'll get about 6 reps in spring. You know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is. You can't have your best players out all over the place. Benjamin Morrison out, etc. And it just cost them. I thought that the actual game plan, just as an example from Al Golden, to Kenton's point, was what you had to do. And I know nobody wants to hear that. You are not running cover 1 against Ohio State. If Ben played without him, you are definitely not running it. And then you got to give credit to Chip Kelly. They ran Howard and basically used him in the exact same manner that Notre Dame did with Riley Leonard. There is no way around it. You have an extra hat to block. It's just generic math. And he's a dude. He's 235, 240 pounds. He's not fun to tackle, and Notre Dame didn't have an answer for that. So they got run over without like Ken was talking about Michigan. Their game plan's better because they have 2 guys up front that Notre Dame doesn't have, like girth, because Riley Mills isn't in there because of the injury. And Howard Cross, while he's good, he's banged up, and he's not a big guy for the position. He's a quick, just make guys miss. It's not the same. So Ohio State did a good job on those short yardage and killed Notre Dame in that.
And just a quick thing before we go back to you, Joe. To speak about the scheme for a second, when you think about going cover 1, right? What does cover 1 leave you susceptible to? And what happened every time Notre Dame went cover 1? Even when they had great coverage, man coverage leaves you susceptible to the quarterback run. It's a pick your poison. And tonight, Ohio State was wheeling and dealing the best cyanide I've seen in some time. So you look at this thing, and again, it's not a situation where I would say, hey, I know for a fact if everybody's healthy, Notre Dame wins this game. I'm not going to tell that lie. But what I will say is this. Looking at this game, even solely, isolating from everything else, just saying just tonight, what did we see? We saw an Ohio State team that had better Jimmies and Joes. Much more than the scheme was just, they were throwing up to wide open guys all night and the running lanes where you could drive a Mack truck through them. That wasn't the case. They just had guys. I remember there was one play when they were driving to go up 21-7. Travion Henderson gets hit at about the 20 or 15, and he falls forward to the 8. Like, that's the type of stuff where it's like, as a coach, what do you want them to do? Their safety is coming down and trying to make a tackle, and this guy's still getting 7 yards after contact. So, again, this is one of those moments where I'm looking up and I'm saying, you got beat by a better team. But, again, this was not an all-out domination to the point where it's like, this is going to be a black eye on Notre Dame's history forever. And to say that it is, look at the last couple of times you played in the national championship or a game like this. It was nowhere near like this.
Yeah, I think, too, it's like the journey to get there is obviously different. Like, you beat Indiana, you beat Penn State, you beat Georgia, you've beaten good teams on the way. And Ohio State, I think it's so – and this is a 14 playoff. Ryan Day might have got fired after they lost to Michigan, and now he's the national champion head coach. Like, what Ohio State has done after losing to Michigan is incredible, and that's why I think there's not a ton to be so down about this program right now because of what Ohio State did to Oregon, what they did throughout the college football playoffs. I think the Texas game was not as close as the score really indicated in that one. So, yeah, look, Notre Dame, I did think it really felt like they were going to win this game, honestly, for me. And obviously, I'm very biased as a fan, but they get the fumble, they drive down, and they got a 4th down, and Marcus Freeman decides to kick the field goal. I hated that call. I despise that call. I don't understand why you make that, why you're down by 16 points, and that's the call you make. And, of course, I feel like it's the football god stepping in and just doinking it right off the crossbar. That was a tough one for me, for sure.
Yeah,
I didn't mind it.
Really? Why, Brian?
I didn't mind it in the sense because Riley Leonard's not very accurate. The only thing I could think of is throw a jump ball. I mean, he had no good options, first off. Neither one was a good option. But I think he was worried about not getting anything and just demoralizing the team. Either way, he was going to lose, in my opinion.
But
the doink, though, is still on the kicker. You got to make the kick.
But to your point, Brian, if I don't believe that he's accurate, and I don't believe, hey, we're going to put him in a couple 2-minute drills, I'm not sure he's the guy to get it done. Why not say, oh, to hell with it. This is the closest we're going to be. This is the closest we're going to be to the end zone, possibly for the rest of the game, or at least in this moment, we're right there. We're knocking on the door. I got to try something. That's the one call where I look at, I truly look at it and I say, wait, what was this? What just happened here? Because, again, if I'm looking at that play and I'm saying, okay, if you go for it and you get nothing, right? Let's say everything goes right with that call. You kick the field goal, it goes in. Do you not still need 2 touchdowns?
Oh, yeah.
So if I need 2 touchdowns anyway, I'm going to take the path of least resistance to those touchdowns.
Oh, I'm not saying that was a good one. It was 9.5 minutes left. That's the only thing he can point to. But it is still like a narrow. The biggest problem was it shouldn't have been 9 yards. They didn't get it done on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. That's more on him than it is the 4th down. I mean, they just terrible execution. That's on the coach too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because honestly, the only thing I always kind of hate dumping on kids too much, but that number 1, the Ohio State corner, I just would have thrown at him and just he's so many pass interference penalties.
You know what?
Yeah.
You know what?
Like,
got something
that's kind of like he has 2 or 3 a game. It feels like you watch them play, and he had a couple in this game. So that's the only thing I think that it would have been worth it is throw a jump ball specifically at him, no matter what it is, whether it's Greathouse, who obviously was incredible, who we'll talk about, Mitchell Evans, whoever's one-on-one with them. It could have been any of the guys. Could have been phase on anyone. I'm throwing it up to him just to try to draw a pass interference penalty because he does it so often. But yeah, I just didn't love it. I think even though I do totally agree with you, Brian, about Riley Leonard, and honestly, the way the game's going, the fact that they were in this game the way they were is kind of stunning to me Because
Yes.
it was the thing I thought about the entire year was that if they ever got down big when they're just rolling through these teams, beating everyone by 20 to 30 points week in and week out, was like, is Riley Leonard the guy to when you're down by multiple scores to lead you back in? I was surprised, honestly, to see him actually do it. I just didn't think he had that in his bag in any way.
I don't know why everybody's surprised by this. And let me tell you why I don't know why everybody's surprised. Yes, he struggled from the same thing that many first-year quarterbacks struggle from. That timing, that you just don't get enough reps, that there's a difference between a live scrimmage and a game. There just is. I don't care who you are. I don't care how good the guys you're scrimmaging against are. There's a difference between me and my receivers have run the stick concept 30 times in the real game versus we run it 60 times in practice. There's just a difference. So with that in mind, I knew Riley Leonard was going to get better and better as the season had gone on. And I was one of the few people that all the time, I never believed, hey, Riley Leonard is not the guy that can get that type of thing done. But what I did know is the team was more comfortable relying on other options because they were much safer. And it makes sense. I'm not against that. But I think that this game from Riley Leonard, I expected this all along because I knew watching him at Duke, this guy he's a Mazda in the middle of the project. I'm sorry, he's a Ferrari in the middle of the projects. That's who he is. That's who he was. And I knew that was going to come out at some point in time. And him and Greathouse finally start to build that chemistry over these last couple games. And you saw it. You saw what it looked like when he finally truly got clicking. That pass over the shoulder to Greathouse, he put it in the perfect spot. That's a big-time throw. Even if there's a safety closing in, I can only put it in one spot, and he put it exactly there. So, again, I don't believe that Riley Leonard's the type of guy that dropping back 50 times is your path to success, but I do believe he could hit those big-time throws to a point where I wasn't surprised that he brought Notre Dame back in this game.
Well, I'm glad he made some key plays, but like the fade ball that he threw to Mitchell Evans, he threw out of the end zone. He had a small corner on him. He's just so erratic. It's bizarre. And then that throw you just talked about, Joe Montana in his prime would have tipped his cap because you ain't going to throw it no better. He's really hard to project play to play. And I have no idea why that is, but he's been that way forever. So you kind of are what you are. I'm guessing that's why Marcus had cold feet on the fourth down. And you can second guess him. But again, my thing is, if you want to second guess Marcus, he should have stepped in and helped them find better plays on first, second, and or third down to not be in 4th and 9. That's the biggest thing. So it's still the defense that's unfortunate. They just didn't have enough bodies healthy at the end of the year to run what they normally run. If you have Traore and you have Riley Mills, that's a completely different game. But Kenton said it, this is a game of attrition, especially when you get to games 14, 15, and 6. Think about the last 2 games. You played the Bulldogs and the Nittany Lions, 2 of the most physical teams in the country. Notre Dame didn't have any juice left in the tank defensively. Like, they were missing tackles that they don't normally miss. Some of them kind of bad. That long run by Judkins. Drake Bowen overran that hole so bad. That was one of the worst run gap fits he's ever tried to make in his life. They just made really bad errors that they don't normally make. And the wear and tear kind of took it on them. And the team, as Kenton said, that had more players, they had more depth. And it showed.
All right, you mentioned we're talking 4th down, obviously, with the field goal. We're going to take our first break because I don't think it's the only 4th down that Notre Dame fans are going to be not very happy with when they look back on this game. So we will get into the 4th and 2 fake punt play and what that was and our reaction to it as we break down Notre Dame losing the national championship game to Ohio State. This is the Notre Dame Squad Show here on the Locked On Sports Chicago and Locked On Irish YouTube channel. This message is brought to you by Prizepicks, the place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. Prizepicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports, whether it's the playoffs or regular season. Prizepicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get on the action with Prizepicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. All right, 4th and 2. Angeli comes in. He's the up man, and they run a fake pass. It's in Faison's hands. He drops it. Probably the first moment where I think Notre Dame fans are just like, what are you doing here? Just run a play. Just run a normal play. Run Riley Leonard or run Jeremiah Love or Price or anyone. But that's the call. And look, it should have worked. I didn't love it, not just because it didn't execute. I just didn't like the idea of having to go for it in that sense. Kenton, I'm curious, when you see Notre Dame do that, what your reaction is as the game is unfolding.
My reaction is the same as what you had. If you're going to go for it, just go. Just go. If you believe that, hey, we need this 2 yards more than anything that we can do, and here's the thing. We all know that if it works out, you don't hear anything about it. We're not talking about it right now and all that. But it didn't. And you've always got to factor in your risk versus your reward. Your risk in that moment, you're giving them 7. You're guaranteeing them 7 in essence in that moment. Your reward, if it works out, you still got a long way to drive. Like, that's the part that blows me about this. It's not like we're like, man, we're right up against it. And, if we get this first, this is guaranteeing us point. It's not. It's not. So I look at that play, and yes, it should have worked. Yes, this is what we mean by the Jimmies and your Joes. The play was perfectly called. The execution of it, not so much. But at the end of the day, I sit here and I say, if you're going to go with your guys. Go with who brought you to the dance. Did fake punks bring you to the dance? Is that who brought you? No. That may be the prettiest girl at the dance in that moment, but your old lady bought you. Don't get left on the side of the road going with somebody new.
Yeah, I didn't mind the play itself in general, but not for that situation and Euroing in. I was kind of, and by the way, Steve threw a really good pass. Faison's got to catch that, by the way. Just he put it low and away. The DB had decent so the execution, had it been there, I mean, who knows what happens, but that's the whole point of it. It's an awkward thing to put out there. Everybody saw Steve run onto the field. Ohio State, honestly, didn't do a very good job again. I was a little bit surprised.
Pretty terrible job, honestly. It's pretty obvious, what was about to happen.
And Notre Dame failed. I mean, and Faison's been really good for Notre Dame. He's been really good. That one hurt because they gave him 3. They didn't get 7. They did get 3. And if he misses that field goal, then Notre Dame escapes. But they gave him 3 points, and that ended up being a big deal towards the end of the game too. So, again, Notre Dame couldn't throw the ball there for a while. They couldn't run the ball. Jeremiah wasn't healthy. All those things led into them being desperate. That was a desperate play call, and it backfired. No way around it.
Yeah, obviously he makes up for it on the kind of Philly special-ish play to get the 2-point conversion. So makes up for it in a big way. Now, obviously, on a positive note, for this game for Notre Dame, not just as we'll talk about the future of this team, Greathouse was electric in this game. What, Brian, you said before the game you were looking on Prizepicks and it was like 17 and a half yards.
20, something like that. Whoever, I'm not trying to be mean. I don't even bet. But if I don't bet, and if I'd have known that, my buddy mentioned it to me, I'd have been throwing out hundreds. Like, that's one of the dumbest lines I've ever seen in my life. He's their primary receiver. So anyway, he got it on the very first play when he made some guys miss and scored, and then he had a 30-yard touch, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's a good football player. So obviously Prizepicks did not respect Notre Dame's passing game at all. And they ironically threw for more yards than Ohio State. And he had more yards than Jeremiah Smith. That's a pretty impressive evening. So Greathouse, of all players, he was as electric as anybody in the game. Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at what Jaden Greathouse has done down the stretch here, he's shown up massively in these last 2 games. I get it. You look at what he did last game, and you say the law of averages is going to bring him back down. But again, I had this suspicion all year. I was in a very, very loud minority all year saying Riley Leonard is better than y'all are giving him credit for. and he's going to find something with these receivers at some point in time. And it seemed like he found it against Georgia. I'm sorry, he found it against Penn State and continued even deeper in this game with Greathouse because, man, Greathouse has got hands. He's got the ability to make those tough contested catches. You just got to put it in a spot where he can do something with it, and he showed you. I'm going to make something shake. Just get me the ball. Get it near me, and I'll make something really good happen, which is what he did. And I'm going to tell you something. When you talk about silver linings for this game, everybody wants to talk about the future and all that. But even if you talk about the present, everybody talked about Ford in the start. Everybody talked about Jeremiah. So, oh, he's the guy. Notre Dame's got nothing for him, and Notre Dame doesn't have a single guy that can get open. Well, on the biggest stage of them all, in the biggest moment of them all, when the lights were the brightest, when it would have made sense to tuck the tail and say, all right, we're down 31-7. This is over. Jaden Greathouse just shows up and shows the hell out. So you have got to, even in this loss, appreciate how well he played and how hard he fought as an individual.
Yeah. I mean, as a sophomore, you got to think like him and Jeremiah Love, it's the foundation of what you're the most excited about for next season for Notre Dame, for sure. Like that those two guys are, we think Notre Dame's offense should be pretty formidable next season just based on those two talented players alone and what they could bring. And I think it's like, there's only so much you can say about losing a game like this. Like, It sucks. We talked about the injuries. We talked about the bad decisions or the questionable decisions that have been made. And we'll kind of, the final 15, 20 minutes of the show here, start to look ahead for Notre Dame. I do think that he is a piece to where it's what I'm most excited about next season for the Irish. And Brian, obviously, recruiting better than anyone, obviously. So, what Notre Dame's kind of got in the bag already, what they're built on. What do you think that the long-term and short-term outlook is for Notre Dame next year? Do you think they could be back here next year?
I do for a couple of reasons. Number one is the schedule. Miami's the opening game on the road next year. But
Carson Beck, baby.
Who knows what's going to happen with him, and I hope he has a good recovery. But that was a really awkward injury. There's no guarantees, and that's going to be more mental than physical, I'm guessing, because he knows he's going to get blitzed from the opening whistle. They're going to come after him. But they got A&M at home. They got SC at home. Who else on the schedule would remotely match up with Notre Dame just player to player?
You're telling me you're not worried about the Purdue Boilermakers? That's not something that concerns you, Brian? It's an in-state rivalry. It's an in-state rivalry.
Anyway.
Hey, they play a playoff team next year. They play Boise State.
Boise State will be good, but they'll also be a team that gets beat by 20 points. It's kind of what I think. That running back not being there changes the ballgame a little bit. I saw their backup. He's not playing in the NFL. So Notre Dame has that, and they've got enough quarterbacks coming up the ranks. I don't know which one it will be, and I don't know if it'll be the same one for the whole year, but they've got enough quarterbacks. They should be good. And this is the second consecutive year. This is the biggest thing. Again, just what Kenton brought up rightfully at the beginning. This is the second year in a row Notre Dame hasn't had a problem with injuries. It's been ridiculous. And they still made it to the title game with that. You're not going to get 3 years in a row like this. I mean, that'd be unprecedented. So I would have to think, if Traore comes back, obviously they're going to have other guys that are younger players like Faison. I mean, he's going to get better. Jordan, Jeremiah Love is unbelievable. He has to come back. He can't even turn pro, which he's obviously physically ready. Price has a chance to come back. You got Aeneas. They got a lot of young guys. Micah Gilbert's the one I hope, the young guy like you were talking, waiting in the wings. He's the receiver from Kenton's neck of the woods. He's a North Carolina guy. That's the player they need to step forward as a 6'3" receiver. And they got some transfers coming in. The kid from Virginia. There's a reason to think they're going to be good. The defense has got tons of talent. I'm not worried about the defense. They'll be a top 5 team. They'll be just fine, but it doesn't make it any better tonight. It's just that I think that Notre Dame's foundation is so good. They're going to be a top 10 team. Like being number 8 at the end of the year in 2 or 3 years will be a disappointment. They're to that point where their roster is consistent. You don't go, man, they really suck at this position. They don't have anybody. They don't have a spot like that on the roster anymore. And the little holes that they do have, they got a couple of pretty good players out of the portal at D tackle, defense back, etc. They got a really good receiver from Virginia. 6'4", 220-pound boundary receiver. Like, they've done a good job of filling holes. So Marcus Freeman has the program at a really good place.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something. When you talk about the outlook of this program, when you talk about, will they be back next year or anything like that, I very genuinely, and I mean this from the deepest part of my heart, the rest of the country should be very worried about what Marcus Freeman is putting together in South Bend. Extremely worried. We're, like Brian talked about, the injuries. And you know a fun thing that we haven't even touched on? This mystery illness that all of these players popped up with out of the blue. This mystery illness that clearly had effects on players that meant something to this game. You cannot look at this team and say that the outlook is anything other than bright. And I know it hurts right now. I know you don't want to hear this. You don't want to hear, hey, the future's bright. But I am telling you, I'll bet dollars to your donuts, because Lord knows I love me Krispy Kreme, especially when that red light is on. That's neither here nor there. The reality is this. If Marcus Freeman ain't back here in the next 2 to 3 years, that would be the surprise to me. Him winning 1 or 2, I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. But him not getting back, this team not getting back, that would be the shock. Because like Brian said, your schedule is very favorable. And as much as nobody wants to hear this, losing in this fashion, in this way, you had second and third string guys. You had true freshmen have to step up and play big snaps. They had to play big snaps. Even last game against Penn State, you had 2 freshmen on the edge giving Drew Aller hell. So you look at that, and what game scares them next year? What game is too big for those freshmen next year, or those sophomores next year who are the true freshmen this year? They've seen it. They've deemed it. They've done it. They're celebrating the alumnus of these big games. So when it's time for them to get back here, they'll be prepared.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of this team being so young in a lot of ways, the Northern Illinois game, like I feel confident that won't happen next season. I don't think that's going to be a thing. All right, we got a couple more things to get into. Curious to pick Brian's brain a little bit on the quarterbacks. I know we briefly mentioned them there about next year. College football playoff question after our first final year of seeing the 12-team format. A bunch of stuff to get into. A big change on the horizon, potentially already for Notre Dame. And thanks to our friends at FanDuel, who we're about to talk about here, we've already got odds on the national championship picture for next year. We'll get into all that next year in the Locked On Sports Chicago and Locked On Irish YouTube channel on our Notre Dame squad show, reacting to Notre Dame losing the national championship game to Ohio State. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel is a super easy app to navigate. If you're looking at the NFL games this last weekend, all 4 dogs covered in the games this weekend based on the final closing lines, including the Houston Texans, who played the Kansas City Chiefs. They even covered their game as well. All of that easy to use at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, FanDuel odds, plus 1,200, Notre Dame, the 6th best odds to win the national championship in 2025-26. It goes as follows. Ohio State, plus 450, Texas and Arch Manning, plus 650, Oregon tied at plus 650, Georgia at plus 700, Penn State, plus 850, and then comes in Notre Dame at 6 at plus 1,200. I like it. If I wasn't in Texas and I could legally wager on that right now, I'd probably do it myself, to be honest with you. But I'm in a state that doesn't allow legal gambling. I think that makes a lot of sense to have them there. I'm actually a little surprised it's not a little bit lower just because of the brand. But my guess a lot of that goes back to the quarterback question that will be probably the question for Notre Dame fans this offseason is who is going to be the quarterback week 1 against Miami. I think will loom large over this offseason and really be the number one topic, I would imagine. So, Brian, can you give us a little insight of a couple other options and what you think it looks like for all of us?
Well, it'll be an unfortunately very awkward spring for Marcus Freeman because no matter what he says, nobody's going to like it. And that's just the way quarterback battles work. The parents of these kids are all going to want definitives. He won't give any, and somebody's probably going to leave. That's how it works at every school every year, and that's the end of the story. So I know Tim O'Malley over at the Notre Dame 24/7 site's been tracking like quarterback transfers in Notre Dame since the early 80s. About 2/3 of the kids transfer at quarterback. It's been that way forever. That's not going to suddenly change. And quite frankly, there's not much you can do about it. But right now, obviously, Angeli is the backup, but the key guy is CJ Carr. And everybody knows it. But if you start CJ, do you lose both Minchie and Angeli because they're older than him? Freeman is in an awkward spot. Most talented guy is the most young guy. So I don't know how he's going to finish spring ball out with that. But somebody's going to leave between now and in the next fall camp. It's just a matter of who and when.
All right, well, before we keep looking at the future of Notre Dame, Barrett Sallee, host of Smothered and Covered, national podcast here for Locked On Sports, live there at the national championship game. I know I saw your tweets. It looked like you predicted Notre Dame to win this game.
Yeah,
obviously, didn't go that way. I'm curious from the press box view what you thought of this game today.
I thought that Marcus Freeman, for the first time, really since he got that job, panicked a little bit, was uncharacteristically making calls that didn't make sense, like the fake punt, right? If you're going to go for it, just go for it. Just like what? Why are you messing around with a low percentage call like that? Kicking a sad field goal that doinks off the upright. I actually understand the idea that, okay, you need to have 17 to win, but you're not going to get two more possessions. So I didn't understand that either. He's never been in this situation. Ryan Day has. So it's hard to, you can't. I've been around a long time. It's really hard in your mind to sort of follow through with your thoughts, how you're going to handle situations like this. You have to fail. You have to fall down to walk, right? Ryan Day's done that a lot. And to his credit, he figured it out. He learned his lessons, and they deserve to win. But for Marcus Freeman, I think it's just one of those things where, okay, now you know what not to do. Now you understand your flaws. Now you know what works. And now you know you need better players. You don't need a lot, but you need some more talent. You need some more depth. And that can go a long way for a Notre Dame team that's still on the rise.
Barrett, Kenton just mentioned this, Riley Leonard, we get the tweet, the report that he's throwing up on the sidelines. Is there anything about this bug that's been going around for Notre Dame that they've been talking about? It's been 4 weeks now, from the defense to the backups and special teams to now the offense. It seems like did you guys know going into the game from the media? Because I thought it kind of quieted down about them being sick. Did you know going in that this could potentially be still a thing for Notre Dame?
I had heard rumblings about it, but it was one of those things last week. I was in Miami, and we heard about it the day before. I think Tyler Horka broke that the day before. So I kind of thought okay, I have 2 kids. I know how sicknesses go around, man. They're like petri dishes. So could it still be lingering? Okay, yeah, maybe, but I didn't think that it was anywhere close to what it has been, what it's been reported. I still wonder though, guys, it's been public for Notre Dame, right? It's freaking January. Everyone's probably sick. I'm sure there are guys on Ohio State's roster that are sick too. I don't say that's why I'm not saying it. I think it's an excuse. Look, yeah, you got bit hard by it. Notre Dame did. Others have dealt with it. And that's just sort of the time we live in. But I had heard rumblings about it, but nothing concrete.
Kenton, so we were just talking about, Notre Dame, and obviously we've hit on this game a lot, and Brian just kind of gave his thoughts on the quarterback situation. But as you look at this team going forward, as for FanDuel, plus 1,200 to win the national championship game next season, as someone that, sees a lot of teams that Notre Dame will play covering the ACC for us, what's your kind of outlook on the very near future for the Irish?
I'm surprised that they're not a higher favorite here.
Yeah.
And let me tell you why. When you think about what it takes to win a national championship, it's not just about being the best team. Sometimes it's about getting good draws. Sometimes it's about getting some luck. Sometimes it's about getting some things to fall your way. And those are the things that are a little bit harder to predict. But sometimes things like scheduling work out in your favor, especially if you're a Notre Dame team. Even with the agreement to play against, I believe it's 6 ACC teams a year. The ACC teams that they have on the schedule, I'm trying to find teams that finished in the upper half of the ACC, and I believe Syracuse was the only one. Pitt finished 6-7, I believe. NC State finished 6-7. Boston College, I believe, finished with a very similar record of maybe 7-6 or something like that, but they were still in that same kind of area there. So I look at that and I say, hey, that's not really a problem. And then beyond that, you talk about the quarterback position and the quarterback questions. What team doesn't have similar questions going into next year?
Feels like Texas is the only one.
But every team you mentioned ahead of them, I'm looking up like, who's your quarterback going to be? Who's your guy? What's going on there? And yet and still, we're kind of having this question about, is Notre Dame and their quarterback situation going to be good enough? Here's the deal. The team around that quarterback next year is going to be spectacular. And there are 3 categories of quarterbacks. The quarterback you win because of, that's your Brady. That's your Mahomes. That was what Stafford was to Detroit for many, many years. And then you got your quarterback you win with. Those are your game manager type of guys, Trent Dilfer on the Ravens, that type of deal. Like, oh, hey, don't kill us and we'll be all right. And then there's your quarterbacks you got to win in spite of, where it's like, dude, please, we're begging you. Stop turning the ball over and we'll be okay. I think Notre Dame is good enough next year to have a guy on the low end of a guy that you win with, and they'll be okay. They'll be okay to get there. Now, if one of these guys separates himself, if Carr shows that talent and is mature ahead of his years per se, I have no doubt in my mind Notre Dame's going to be back. They'll be back right here, and I'll be back right here next year talking about Marcus Freeman did it. He banged his head against the wall in 2025, and then in 2026, the confetti is now gold and dark blue.
That wouldn't shock me, to be really honest with you, because like you said, they got players around, and quarterback is just so wild in college football from year to year. I mean, a lot of people in Columbus were talking crap about Will Howard, and he started what he started.
I wasn't in Columbus.
Well, I mean, like tonight, like some of the throws, the coverage was good. It'd be low and away and stuff, and it's like John Elway, Joe Montana, Dan Marino, guys like that would be like, that's how you do it. And he did it over and over again. There were 3 of them with a guy in his face. There is no coverage or play call for that. There's none.
No.
So Notre Dame kind of ran into a buzzsaw from that perspective too.
Yeah, the no-looker to Judkins to make it 21-7. I'm like, how did he see him? He's scrambling. He's looking to the right. He's looking to the right. And then he said, oh, there's a running back. It's just one of those moments where, again, and let's be honest, right? And this ain't hate because Notre Dame lost, because most of us aren't even Notre Dame guys per se. Let's be honest. Is Will Howard in that category of quarterback that you win because of? No. He's a guy.
Maybe he is now.
Yeah,
Even
for one night he was.
Yeah.
Even after tonight, I still see him as long-term a guy you win with. But a guy you win with, when you get to that upper tier win with guys, they'll have a game or two where you win because of them.
And you know what? Like, I know that the phrase game manager gets bandied about for quarterbacks who aren't very good. What's your first job as a quarterback? Manage a damn game. And he did it.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you guys, we've all been around college football and are fans or played or covered it for years and years and years. We know what the fan reaction is going to be for a lot of this. Al Golden is going to Marcus Freeman, like, eyes are going to be on them for the defensive performance in the first half. Ian Rappaport could not wait fast enough to, as soon as the game ended, to tweet that Al Golden is a top candidate to become the Cincinnati Bengals DC. So it does feel like there's going to be a change very quickly with the Irish to be expected on their coaching staff. It's not Marcus Freeman to the Bears like it seemed like maybe they were actually going to try to do for a while. But immediate reaction, Barrett, just hearing that Al Golden feels like he's leaving.
Big loss. Fundamentally, I think Notre Dame, that's the one thing. Defensive line-wise, that team was always getting after it, creative up front, getting in quarterback's face. Notre Dame's attractive enough. to find somebody else. I think any defensive coordinator will look at that roster and look at what Notre Dame has to offer from a facility standpoint, from a financial standpoint, and from a job standpoint in terms of upward mobility. It's there. It's got it. I think the best compliment any coach can have is that he loses coordinators every single year. It's one thing that it's not, everyone talks about coaching continuity. No. The Nick Saban model. Get your dudes hired. Get your dudes moving in different directions. That means you're succeeding. And so Notre Dame will be fine. Notre Dame will be fine no matter what.
Kenton, your thoughts?
Just out of curiosity, what position did Marcus Freeman play?
Linebacker.
What was his
He was
role?
a linebacker.
What was his role in the Brian Kelly tenure?
DC.
Okay. All right. I think they'll be okay.
Yeah.
I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be all right. And don't get me wrong. I think that Al Golden really is one of the best defensive minds in the game. I think he's much better as a defensive coordinator than a head coach. I think he's the kind of Cliff Kingsbury of college football. Because I think Cliff Kingsbury I think the world of him as OC. As a head coach, not so much. But I think the same thing here with Al Golden in terms of he's a great defensive mind, but he's not the type of defensive mind that I'm like, there's no way that they can replace him because
irreplaceable.
Exactly. If you look back on those big games where they were getting dominated in the past, right? Did it not always seem under the Brian Kelly years? Did it not always seem like the defense is keeping them in the game, but offense, you got to do something. You gotta pinch them or something. You got to do something to get some yardage here. And eventually the defense was just, the other guys are on scholarship too. Bama's got guys on scholarship too. Some would argue that Bama had NIL before NIL, but that's neither here nor there. We're not talking about that today.
Everybody in the SEC did, Kenton.
Hey, listen. He said it, not me, okay? Don't beat me up on Twitter about this.
I'm an SEC guy. I know how we roll down here.
Fair enough.
Used to be Dodge Chargers, used to be Escalades. Now it's Lamborghinis, right?
Yeah.
I was just in the lowly ACC. I neither one of those. My first car was an 03 Mazda 6. The thing was so old it could have joined the military. But
6, nice.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, Marcus Freeman is going to coach up that defense. He's going to find a great DC hire, and they're going to be just fine in that.
Fine.
I don't know if he's definitely going to leave or not, but he's been working with the NFL for years, and he was with the Bengals already. Maybe he just wants to go back. But I wouldn't worry much about it. Notre Dame has invested a lot in their coordinators, and it's obviously a very attractive job, and it's Notre Dame. They'll be fine.
Big picture now for not Notre Dame, but for college football, the 12-team playoff is over. First one's in the books. Kenton, do you like it? You want to see big changes? What do you think about the 12-team playoff now that it's over?
I absolutely loved it. I think that there was much too much ado given about all of the reseeding should happen in the second round, and we should redecide how the buys are distributed and all that nonsense. Get these things some time, okay? We're talking about a first iteration. I believe that they've already agreed to expand it to 14. Is that next year or the year after next year?
They haven't agreed to it yet, but
okay.
They will be.
Okay. But either
Money
way,
talks, right?
Either way you cut or slice it, I loved what I saw. Think about what we're seeing in the national championship game. Like you talked about, Joe, Ryan Day is fired in a 4-game playoff situation.
Yeah.
In a BCS situation, he's out the door. Pack your bags, buddy. We just went to the ReliaQuest Bowl. We don't want to hear it. But in this 12-team playoff situation, we got to see a team that was as talented as they come get it done. And I'll tell you what, even beyond the college football playoff, Ohio State has given many teams something to think about in terms of everybody's talking about their talent and their depth. You know what creates talent and depth? Money. You spend $20 million on that salary, on that team, yeah, you'll find some depth. You spend $20 million on ducats on those players, you'll find a lot of depth very quickly. And teams that cannot compete, teams that cannot spend, or teams that will not spend because they're above that, don't worry, you'll be below the other teams very quickly. So I think the college football playoff overall at 12 teams is great. And I think that Ohio State winning, every high school player around the nation should be dancing in the streets.
Yes,
congratulations. All of your prices just went up, baby.
Brian, your thoughts?
I thought the playoff was pretty good, all things considered. the automatic buys, which will be back next year. You got to have a unanimous vote to change things. And Boise, and like those, they're not going to change anything. So it's going to be
Brett
back.
Yormark's like hard pass on that, man.
Yeah. But after next year, that'll go away. So, like, no offense to Boise, they are never getting, unless they do it again next year or whoever's in that spot, there will never be a G5 team in the top 5 again. That's not going to happen. Other than that, I mean, it was pretty good. The teams that are really good at the top, when they're motivated, like an Ohio State, they're going to crush teams like Boise State or Penn State killing us. They're better. So we got what we expected, and the TV networks got the money they expected. It is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I'm a BCS guy. I didn't even like the 4-team playoff. But like a political party, right? Like a political politician, I conceded the race. I'm going to do whatever I can to support the party moving forward, right? I think for college football as a whole, I'm going to be fascinated to see what the ratings were for this game, especially in the second half, when at least we all thought that Ohio State was going to run away with it. But money talks in every aspect of this, right? And a healthy sport is what matters most. And I think for this particular playoff, especially to end like this, really brought casual fans into it. Like, all of us, we're going to watch this anyway, right? Like, we're all going to watch this, but I want the dude who's usually paying attention to the Golden State Warriors or the New York Rangers. This needs to be must-see TV for those people. And I think the playoff, and especially this game, if it rates very well, accomplished that, which is good for everybody.
Yeah, I'm still curious. I did feel like, I don't know how you guys felt quickly. I did feel like the buzz, like at least on social media, didn't feel like super high. I know it's a crazy day. We got presidential inaugurations and like the NFL playoffs are going on, and Mark Andrews drops.
It was my daughter's birthday, which is the most important thing.
Oh, well, happy birthday. I'm sure she's happy you're at a game today, but I'm sure she gets it.
She wanted to get me out of the house, I'm sure.
Yeah. I do feel like part of me is excited for what can be with, maybe eventually the national championship game is played on the Saturday before the AFC and NFC championship games versus coming off the divisional rounds. And I think there's a lot of people who want the playoffs to go in the opposite direction. They want the end on January 1st, and they want the season to start earlier. So I think I am curious what the ratings for this one will be, because they should be huge because of the programs that are involved. So we'll kind of wrap up here. We'll do final thoughts. Kenton, anything from the game we didn't hit on that, or final thoughts from you about Notre Dame season, Ohio State season for tonight's game?
I just want to double down on something Bear said. You get knocked down. You have your knock on the door moment. But guess what? This ain't the NFL where you have a short window of like, hey, this is it. You've got to get it while your quarterback is on his rookie contract.
Yeah.
You've got to get it while your stars are on their rookie contract. This is not the end for Notre Dame. This is not the end. And for people saying that this is the best it'll ever get in South Bend, ask yourself this. How many guys were hurt? And not just hurt. How many of those guys do you predict to play in the NFL for 4 years or more? How many of those guys do you think get a second contract in the NFL? If that number is more than 2, congratulations. You've just admitted this is probably a bad, maybe not worst case, but a bad scenario for Notre Dame. This team will be back. They have did their moment where they've knocked on the door. They've been the bridesmaid. It's time for them to lift the veil and be the bride.
Brian?
I think Kenton's on to something there. Notre Dame still has to add some other pieces, and they've done it to a certain degree. I think that some people are going to be excited with Devontae Smith coming in this next year, the kid from Alabama, and especially Malachi Fields from Virginia, the big-bodied receiver, at 6'4", 220. Notre Dame's going to be a different team moving forward on offense, but defensively, I think they're going to be a problem with or without Al Golden. And to be honest, I think it's going to be fun to see what happens when all the fans really hate Notre Dame because they're top 5 about every year.
I can't wait. I need it.
Notre Dame's the most polarizing team in the country, that's for sure. Maybe except for Colorado right now. But yeah, I mean, look, there's a bunch of different ways to skin a cat, right? Penn State needs receivers. Notre Dame needs a quarterback. Everybody needs something, right? And there are different ways to do it. I think Notre Dame this year showed that, hey, you know what? Roster talent might not be exactly where it needs to be, but great coaching gets you a long way. Ohio State showed, you know what, $22 million is $22 million. SMU showed, hey, you know what, bad conference, but we can still kick the snot out of a lot of teams in that conference. There are a bunch of different ways to get into the playoff, and all you need is a chance, right? Is Notre Dame the second best team in the country? Nah. Is Ohio State, were they the second best, or the best team in the country the majority of the season? Nah. But if you get into it, no matter how you get into it, you can make your way work. And I think that's the most important thing, is that in this era of college football, you can do it in a variety of different ways, as long as you do it, you're true to your identity. In the past, it was, hey, you know what? Let's throw a bunch of money under the table, get the best players, and then we're going to win national championships. Now, I think with what we saw today, you can do it in a variety of different ways. And again, that's good for the sport.
Yeah, I think for me, final thoughts is I never imagined that after they lost to NIU, I would be willing to say that I've never been more confident that Notre Dame is going to win a national championship under Marcus Freeman. Just didn't think that was possible after that loss. Like Marshall, Stanford, NIU, but now it's Penn State, Georgia, toe-to-toe and trying to come back versus Ohio State. So I that's mine, is I am never more confident that Marcus Freeman is going to win a national championship at some point for Notre Dame.
Yeah, for sure. He will.
Hopefully it's next year. That'd be nice to see. I live in Houston, so I got a bunch of Texas fans around me. I'd love to see Notre Dame versus Arch Manning next year. The ratings for that thing would be through the roof. But Barrett, Kenton, Brian, I know we've done a couple of these. All three of you guys have jumped on. Of course, Tyler, who was at the game tonight, did one of them with us as well, the normal host of Locked On Irish. So thank you guys for doing these postcast shows. It's been a lot of fun to do them. Hopefully we'll be doing them again next year for multiple games for Notre Dame as they go through the college football playoff in 2025 and 2026. For those listening on the audio feed, come on over to Locked On Sports Chicago. We're going to go live after every single Notre Dame game. So if it is Carson Beck, if he's healthy, versus Carr week 1, we'll be live on Locked On Sports Chicago as soon as that game wraps up. So congrats to the Irish on a great season. It sucks it came up short of a national championship, but I think a lot of us should still be very happy with the way the season ended. So thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. And we will talk to you next year when Notre Dame takes on the University of Miami.